Hope Floats, Coming into Contact with the Truth. September 19, 2005. Journal entry by Rebekah. Side note, again, this was written prior to the Hebrew walk that we are on currently. Isaac's name used to be Chris. I am changing Chris to Isaac, and I did not know the names of God. I will be putting those into this journal entry as I read. Last night, Isaac and I had a date that was long overdue. With a handful of movies to choose from and a Papa Murphy's pizza in the front seat, we drove the kids and ourselves up to camp. After dropping the girls off at a friend's home on the way, we made our way over to the camp, just a stone's throw from the girls. Michael, a friend of ours who works at camp and was gone for the weekend, had said that we could use his pad. So we could watch our movie, eat pizza together, and I could put my sore foot up, for I was on crutches due to a sprain. And I wanted to do this in a new environment without the girls. It was what Isaac and I needed. We needed a date. But we didn't have long for a date. We barely had long enough to watch a movie before we would have to get the girls and head home. So while I put the pizza in the oven, Isaac put a movie into the DVD player to check it out. But something was wrong with the connections, and Isaac spent the next hour trying to figure out what was wrong. Finally, he got a hold of Michael by cell phone and figured it out. Well, by the time we could get an image on the TV and sound coming out of the stereo, we only had about an hour and a half left to watch a 2.5-hour movie. I pulled out Hope Floats that I brought from home because I felt like there was something to that movie that I needed. But Isaac wanted to watch one of Michael's movies sitting by the TV. The movie What Women Want with Helen Hunt and Mel Gibson is what attracted his eye. So we began his movie because I just really wanted to be with Isaac wherever we watched it and whatever we watched. But 5 minutes into it, my stomach didn't feel so good. It just wasn't the right storyline for this evening, and I knew it. Thankfully, a few minutes later, Isaac suggested that we begin a movie that we could finish at home because we wouldn't have time to finish this one on our date, so we put in Hope Floats. I had seen pieces and parts of that movie before, but never the whole thing. So I really didn't understand the storyline, but I'm a fan of Sandra Bullock, so I had been curious about the movie. Looking back now, I know that the Ruach HaKodesh wanted me to see that movie. Looking back, I know that she thwarted Isaac's efforts to figure out those connections in order to force us into a situation where we had to choose one of our own movies to see. And of course, she knew that I really wanted to see Sandra Bullock's movie. And I think that she'd been calling to me through it as it sat on my shelf for weeks, but this moment was the right moment to see it. Through this movie, the Ruach HaKodesh confirmed and solidified what I already knew about Papa's heart towards me. But it gave me a word picture about what Elohim has to do sometimes during the tragedy of this war. And it gave me permission to know something that some leading authors don't even seem to understand. After recently reading one of his books, it seems that Dan Allender believes that God is the author of your life. Now, that is true in the sense that he authored you into existence, but Dan Allender means that God is the author of the good and the bad that happens in your life. But I highly disagree. So just because someone is renowned, published, and is a respected graduate school president with letters after his name doesn't mean that they aren't still in a journey of discovery themselves. And it doesn't mean that lowly me with no degrees, just a mommy, can't understand truth that others seem to fail to see, or are still on a journey to see. There's nothing like experiencing truths through a word picture. It's just what Yeshua liked to do, right? He liked to tell word pictures and parables. And I have decided that movies and maybe movie clips are a powerful thing that Elohim uses to speak to 21st century humans. Your deep heart is affected for good or bad through movies. Whether allowed or not, one can be taken deep into their own heart through good movies. Film is a very powerful medium for both Yehovah Elohim and Hasatan. But I believe that Yehovah uses many parts of Hollywood's talent to call to us. I believe he uses everything that he possibly can use to reach our hearts. Last night, YHVH Elohim and the Ruach HaKodesh used a scene that Hollywood created to expose and confirm the truths of his kingdom and the epic to me. The epic story that we live in, the larger story that we live in. And the Ruach HaKodesh used my reaction to that scene to propel Isaac into a much-needed part of his journey. As the story began, Isaac and I were in tears within the first 5 minutes. Bertie, Sandra Bullock, finds out about her husband's affair with her best friend on national TV. The little girl, Bernice, is in the audience. Bertie ends up taking her daughter across the country to start a new life with her mother, who is quite a character herself. The story that follows is about Bertie dealing with the truth of her great loss, finding her heart, learning how to follow it, and how to accept true love and get on with life. But what affected me the most was the daughter, Bernice. I didn't like her throughout the movie. Number one, I think the casting was bad. I didn't feel that she matched Bullock very well, and so it was hard to see them as mother-daughter. Number two, throughout the movie, Bernice had little sympathy for her mother's heartache. Bernice was going through the pain of separation from her daddy, and it was clear that she didn't care much about her mother's decision to leave him or care about her mother's heart at all. She didn't truly understand what was going on. How could she? She was just a little girl. But it also felt like she didn't want to understand. In her mind, her mother was the one who was keeping her from happiness, keeping her from daddy. To her, her mother was the reason for her pain, and that is where she laid the blame. Bernice didn't seem to hold her daddy accountable for any of the pain she had. And she believed with her whole heart that her daddy would come get her any day and restore happiness to her heart. So for months she waited by the gate for her dad to come get her, her heart in a lockdown waiting for the illusion to become real. The part of the movie that spoke volumes to me was towards the very end, and it was the hardest one to watch of all. For a moment I felt for Bernice. For a moment I cried with her. The cheating father had come to get divorce papers signed by Bertie. It happened to be on the same day that Bertie buried her mother. Bernice was so excited to see her daddy, she clung to him. She knew he came to take her away from her mother and to a better life. She ran up to her bedroom and packed all her belongings in a little bag and raced back downstairs to find her daddy walking towards the car. She met up with him and began to walk beside him, packed, ready to go with him. As she caught up with him and walked beside him, he grabbed her arm and said, "Where do you think you're going, Bernice?" She looked up at him and said, "I'm going with you, Daddy." He said, "No, you can't come with me." And he continued walking. She was persistent and kept walking with him and kept saying confidently that she was. He looked back at Bertie standing on the porch and said, "Are you going to help me here, Bertie?" What Bertie did blew me away. She said nothing, and she made no move towards her daughter. Instead, she kept her watering eyes and her tear-stained face riveted on her daughter. She moved to a chair on the porch, sat down, and watched the truth hit Bernice like a Mack truck. Bertie really had no other option. Bernice, her daughter, didn't get it, and she would never get it unless she was hit broadside with her father's choice and the truth of who he actually was. Bertie, Mom, would never be able to be close to her daughter unless she let this moment happen. It was critical. Bertie did the only thing she could and allowed Bernice to come into contact with the truth. And then she picked up the pieces afterwards. The father continued to try to get Bernice to turn around and stay with her mother, but Bernice was persistent and didn't want to believe that her daddy didn't want her. So she threw her bags into the trunk of the car, and immediately her dad pulled them back out again. Then she grabbed her bag, ran around the car, and begged for him to open the door so she could get in. All the while, he kept telling her how much he loved her while he refused to come through for her. In the background, you could see Bertie sitting on the porch watching with pain, knowing that it is not time for her to be involved yet, but feeling for her daughter. As the car pulls away, Bernice screamed for her daddy, grabbing for the car, clutching it as tears rolled down her face. As the weight of the moment hit Bernice, you see Bertie begin to walk down the front porch stairs. She comes into focus and simply scoops up Bernice in her arms, still crying, and holds her close and takes her back into the house. Wow. Powerful. That was the most powerful point in the movie. It spoke volumes to my heart. It sits in my heart, thoughts that are devoid of words, but I will try to put into the movement of my heart into words here. Unless we are allowed to come into contact with the truth, we too will be stuck standing by the gate, forever waiting for something that is never going to happen. We must let go. But letting go can't always happen just by sheer willpower, because our heart will do what it wants to. In the right moment, contact with the truth can change the heart and help it let go in a split second. Unless we are allowed to come into contact with the truth, we will continue to throw blame at Yehovah instead of to whom it belongs. Unless we are allowed to come into contact with the truth, we will miss out on the beauty of relationship with the ones who really love us and who really mean us well. If the truth isn't allowed to impact us, then we will buy the lie. We will buy the illusion. We will think the illusion is real. That's one reason why Elohim can't always rescue us from the consequences of sin, because part of the process of learning who He is and what His intentions are towards us is coming into contact with the truth, and that is sometimes very, very painful. If His supreme goal was to just keep us from pain, then He'd have to keep us away from coming into contact with the truth. He would have to continue to give us the illusion of healing and the illusion of happiness to avoid the pain. Hasatan plays into that by attaching messages to those experiences, by saying that it's Yehovah's fault we are experiencing the pain. After all, isn't He all-powerful? He could get rid of the pain. I thought He was a good daddy. Hasatan will throw us all kinds of lies. It would look as silly as Bertie not allowing Bernice to try to go with her daddy. What would that have benefited either of them? What is Yehovah Elohim's ultimate goal? His ultimate goal is to rescue our hearts from bondage, to restore our hearts to what He made them to be, to release us into the freedom of His love. His goal is not to keep the truth from impacting us. It can't possibly be. Now, Yehovah Elohim does not orchestrate pain and heartache. He didn't author the fall of man. With every ounce of me, I believe that Yehovah Elohim never causes trauma, nor writes chaos and loss into our story. That would go against what I know about His heart. It would go against what I understand about the war, and it doesn't fit with the open view that I have of Yehovah that talks about how important free will is to Him. These horrible things that we experience just come with the territory. It is part of our story because at this moment we live between the fall and paradise restored. But I also believe that sometimes Yehovah is, in a way, relieved when a moment arises in our walk where the truth has a chance to impact our hearts like nothing else could. As He walks with us and as we live life, He sees situations approaching that have the potential to change our hearts, bring our hearts healing, and bring us home to Him, and bring us into a trusting relationship with Him. And sometimes the truth has to smack us between the eyes in order to get there. So I believe that Elohim is sometimes forced into a moment, much like what Bertie was forced into. Bertie didn't author that painful moment. She didn't even allow it to happen. It had to happen. It was exploding onto the moment without her help. She knew that Bernice had to see what her father was really like. What was her father really choosing? And it wasn't her. Bernice's father not only had an affair on his wife, her mother, but also on her, his daughter. And she had to feel the impact of that. She had to feel the weight of her father's choices on her life in order for her to have the clarity that she needed. Bertie had to let Bernice be deeply cut by the truth. The mom had to let her daughter be deeply cut with the truth. She knew that if she intervened and didn't allow Bernice to go through this moment of awakening, that Bernice would continue to hate her even more than she did before. It was a smart decision on Bertie's part to not do anything for a time, and a maneuver that brought the daughter's heart back to the mother's heart. Likewise, YHVH Elohim cannot force us to understand that he has a good heart. He cannot convince us of that with mere words. It has to be part of your story. He has to let the truth impact us. It's critical. Hasatan wants us to believe that Elohim is the one to be angry at. He wants us to buy the lie that YHVH Elohim is a mixture of evil and good, that at his core, he actually might be bad. Hasatan wants you to think that your salvation lies beyond in someone else's arms. Hasatan attaches a powerful message to everything that happens to you. He would love to keep our hearts in bondage and anger towards YHVH, blaming him for our heartaches. He'd be happy to keep us in bondage with a state of waiting. As YHVH Elohim brought us face to face with things that we have to let go of, Hasatan would love to step in and keep us bound, unable to let go of those same things that bind up our hearts or the things that are mere illusions of the truth. YHVH Elohim knows that mere words cannot change our heart. That's why he wants us to walk with him, not just read about him. To the Pharisees he said, "You study the scriptures so that you may know me, but your hearts are far from me." No matter what Bertie tried to say to Bernice, Bernice wouldn't hear it. What changed her heart? The reality of the truth. Yes, it was deep hurt, but on the other end, there was deep joy. Just as Bertie allowed Bernice to come into contact with the truth, YHVH Elohim allows us to come into contact with the truth, so that the eyes of our hearts may be opened. And after he watches through his own tears, he comes down off the porch and scoops us up in his arms and holds us tight while we finish crying, and he takes us home.